Hey friends, this is our Dean's fandom of fiction. In today's special we are gonna see Winchester a Monster's Nightmare. Sorry for disturbance, you skipped 20 seconds from here. This note for author of the fanfiction. I have given credits to author in description of the video by. If the original author wishes to reclaim copyright or remove this video, I kindly request before giving copyright strike. Please contact us using the information provided in the pinned comment. We respect and acknowledge authorship rights, and I will delete that specific video by myself. Thank you. Fiction start from here. You know, I was a good girl mostly. I'm not saying I didn't break the law when I had to, but I never hurt anyone. Not until he found me. If he had taken his shot when I was alone, I would be dead now. But he bided his time and followed me home. Followed me to the rundown, abandoned house that I and my younger sister were squatting in. Being a freak, I had known that being caught by one of them was a real possibility, and the thought was always foremost on my mind. But I had my little sister, Molly, to think about. She was only 9, and she depended on me to watch out for her. Hey Maggie, Molly squealed excitedly as I pushed open the old squeaky door and stepped inside. She came running at me and slammed into my gut, shoving me back against the door. I'm so glad you're home. Glad to see you too, Mole. I wheezed, trying to draw air back into my lungs. I smiled at her innocence. She always greeted me the same way, no matter how long I'd been gone. I would never get tired of having the wind knocked out of me when I got home. What did you get? Even though we were alone, Molly whispered the question at me like she wanted to make sure nobody overheard. I reached into the pockets of my jacket and pulled out 2 sandwiches in plastic containers in one hand, and 2 cans of soda in the other. Her face fell into a pout when she saw what I was holding, and she folded her arms in front of her chest. Sandwiches again? Look, Molly. I groaned in frustration. If I thought I could get a job without risking anyone finding out what we are, I would. But you and I both know what happens to shifters when they try to live normal lives. Yeah, I know, Molly huffed, flopping down on her mat on the floor. Hunters get them. The lantern sitting next to our pallets lit up one side of her face, and cast the other into shadow. My heart broke for her that she would never be normal, would never have that apple pie life that everyone else took for granted. I wish Mom was here, she mumbled after a long silence. Well, she's not. Molly flinched at the hardness in my tone. I cringed at my own ill-tempered response. It came out way harsher than I'd wanted it to. But what happened to our mother was the very reason I couldn't risk mingling with humans any more than I had to. She screwed up and got caught shifting. A hunter got involved and that was all she wrote. So I stole what we needed to survive and stayed off the grid as much as possible. I wouldn't let what happened to our mother happen to Molly. She was all I had. I'm sorry, Mole. I know how cooped up you must feel. I sat down next to her on her mat and wrapped my arm around her shoulders, pulling her close to my side. You never let me go outside, Maggie. I think I'm gonna go crazy if I have to stay in this house another day. I cited the dejected tone in her voice, and squeezed her tighter. Well, I could take you to the park tomorrow. How does that sound? She looked up at me with wide eyes and smiled. I so miss that smile. Really, you're gonna take me out? She threw herself at me, wrapping her arms around my neck, knocking me over backwards. Thank you, Maggie. You're welcome, I said, laughing. She needed to feel normal for at least a little while. Hell, we both did. After a moment I pushed her off of me and stood up, brushing the dirt off my pants. Okay, I'm gonna go get out of this skin and get cleaned up. Okay? Good. I don't like that body on you, Maggie, Molly said with her nose scrunched up like she smelled something foul. I didn't either. I was so not into the middle-aged black guy that I was wearing. I didn't mind the color so much, but I didn't feel right as a man. The extra body parts were just too ugh. I shuddered at the thought of having to rip them off. By the time I got back to our mats, Molly had already eaten and was sound asleep under the covers. Shifting took a lot of energy, so I wolfed down my food and called it a night. Sometime during the night, I was woken by warm air wafting across my face. Still being half asleep, I thought vaguely that I had left a window open, but then I remembered that it had been chilly out when I got home, so it couldn't have been an open window. Then I noticed a heavy weight sitting on top of me, and I finally opened my eyes. At first I couldn't see a thing. I had turned the lantern off to conserve the fuel, but after a moment, I could just make out the silhouette of a head hovering above me, blowing hot breath in my face. It was like a shadow had come to life and was sitting on my stomach. My whole body went taut with fear. Was this a dream? Was I dreaming? Wah, MMPH. My question was cut off by a large hand being slapped over my mouth. The shadow raised a finger to its lips as the blank face loomed over me. I suddenly felt something sharp being pressed into my throat, and I couldn't help the gasp that came out. Shhhhh. The shadow turned its head and looked down at my sister, sleeping peacefully beside me, and I started to shake with real fear. I had to give this thing whatever it wanted so it wouldn't hurt my sister. I saw you. The thing that I could now tell was a man whispered breathily in my face through the bathroom window. Oh, God. What did this psycho want? I saw you shift. NNN. I tried to protest behind his hand as I shook my head frantically in denial. He just chuckled in my face, but his laughter stopped suddenly, and he squeezed my face tighter. Don't lie to me, bitch. I know what you are. You think I haven't ganked your kind before? He shook my face as he snarled quietly. Don't fucking lie. I stared up at the fathomless black hole of a face in shocked horror. Oh, fuck. I should have seen it coming. I knew it was too good to last. It was my worst nightmare come true. A hunter. A hunter had finally caught up to me. I fucked up bad, and now a hunter has finally caught up to me. Thinking I could hide from hunters was unbelievably naive. I should have known better. It was my mother all over again. I guess stupidity was hereditary. So, this was it. The end. I would die by the hands of this hunter who was, at the moment, sitting on top of me with one hand over my mouth and the other holding a knife to my throat. A small part of me was actually relieved that I wouldn't have to hide anymore. Wouldn't be so lonely anymore. But that small part was overshadowed by the much bigger part of me that screamed protect Molly. But I wasn't sure how to do that. Should I be still? Wait. Or should I put up a fight and hope to overpower him or catch him off guard? I was too terrified to think straight. Now, the hunter growled softly. I'm gonna take my hand off of your mouth, and you're gonna be a good little monster and not scream, right? I nodded frantically, staring at the black hole where his face should be. He chuckled as he slowly lifted his hand, but kept the blade pressed against my throat. Good girl. Please, I started to sob, and he pressed his finger to my lips this time to shush me. He cooed at me, shifting his weight so that he was bent over my face again. None of that now. Wouldn't want to wake the little one, would we? I stopped breathing for a second when he mentioned my sister, and then my heart started to pound in my chest. I had to take deep breaths through my nose to calm myself before I could speak without getting hysterical again. Are you gonna kill me? I stammered weakly, trying not to come apart. Yes, it came out of his mouth so quick and matter-of-factly that I was the one who was caught off guard. I hadn't expected him to be so blunt about ending my life. I figured he'd lie and just tell me what I wanted to hear before slitting my throat. I was so stunned that all that came out of me in response was a strangled whimper. But not right now. If you cooperate. Cooperate? What the hell does that mean? Well, what do you? And, he whispered, cutting me off. Who knows, I might even be persuaded to let the kid walk. I couldn't let him kill me and leave my baby sister defenseless and alone. She'd never survive on her own. But she needs me. I croaked, nearly in tears. He heaved a heavy sigh before sitting up on my hips. Well, I can always gank you both right now, if that's what you want. He turned his head and looked down at Molly, and I could see his profile. I watched his tongue slide out from between his teeth and lick his lips like he was about to cut into a delicious T-bone steak. When he looked back at me, I still couldn't see his face, but I could somehow sense the wide grin that was plastered across it. A cold chill ran up my spine, and I couldn't help but shiver. Even at 17, I could see that this guy was no ordinary hunter. This man was a predator, a psychotic predator at that. No, please. I suddenly felt Molly twitch next to me and I froze. A startled gasp flew out of my mouth before I could stop it. But she just moaned and rolled on her side, facing away from us without waking. I sighed with relief and just laid there trembling. I had no idea what this lunatic would do if Molly was to wake up and start freaking out. Just be good and do what I say. His free hand moved up my arm and his fingers pressed hard into my shoulder, holding me still. I suddenly had the thought that he wanted something that I had never given to any man. My body. I panicked and started to struggle under him. My arm flew up without my permission, and my elbow connected with his nose. He grunted and grabbed his face with his free hand, before punching me in the face with the hand holding the knife. All I could see was white for a second, and my whole body went limp. The hunter snarled in my face and pressed the knife into my neck just hard enough to break the skin. It wasn't deep, but it felt like he had cut my head off. The pain in my face was immediately forgotten. My throat felt like it was on fire, and it took everything I had in me not to scream. I gritted my teeth and squeezed my eyes shut against the searing pain while he snickered in my face. Silver blade, bitch, the hunter purred in my ear. Hurts like hell, doesn't it? I hope that was a rhetorical question because if I opened my mouth to answer, I knew that an agonized scream would come out instead. Please don't, I whimpered brokenly when I could finally think past the pain from the small cut. Please don't R-rape me. The hunter sat up again and huffed a condescending laugh at my growing terror. Don't flatter yourself, cunt. He sneered. I wouldn't pollute myself with a monster. I'm not that desperate. Well, not yet. Anyway, he chuckled at his own sick humor. I had the feeling that he had no such qualms. He just seemed like the type to take what he wanted, even if it was from someone who wasn't human. I prayed that I was wrong. What do you want? He backed the knife away slightly and swiped at the wound with his thumb, smearing my blood down to the dip of my throat. The action sent a fresh wave of pain through me, and I whimpered uncontrollably. He stroked the hollow of my throat for a moment before wiping my blood off his finger on my shirt. His hand moved back to my shoulder, and his thumb moved in small circles over my clavicle. I need help catching a much bigger monster than you, sweetheart. He leaned into my face again, and for a moment I thought he was gonna kiss me, but his mouth hovered a few inches above mine, so I couldn't help but breathe in his hot breath that smelled and tasted like stale beer. A monster that could end the whole fucking planet. I need help catching a much bigger monster than you, sweetheart. He leaned into my face again, and for a moment I thought he was gonna kiss me, but his mouth hovered a few inches above mine, so I couldn't help but breathe in his hot breath that smelled and tasted like stale beer. A monster that could end the whole fucking planet. I stared up at the pitch black hole of his face in confusion. What monster was strong enough to destroy an entire planet? I was having trouble thinking with his thumb continuing to rub small circles on my collarbone. He said he wouldn't do anything sexual to me, but the way he touched me and leaned in so close gave me the distinct impression that that was a lie. Why would you need my help? I stuttered breathlessly, trying to distract myself from what he was doing with his thumb. I'm nothing, a nobody. He chuckled and shrugged. Maybe so, but even a nobody and nothing such as yourself can still be useful. He twisted the tip of the knife into that little dip between my collarbones, as he purred softly in my face. He didn't push hard enough to break the skin, but it still smarted. See, there's this guy a hunter. It was hard for me to focus on what he was saying with that damn knife digging painfully into my throat. He was enjoying watch me squirm, the bastard. Sam Winchester, he's supposed to lead this army, an army of demons to take over the world. With the thumb stroking my clavicle and the knife within a millimeter of poking through my skin, I had broken out in a cold sweat. Then why don't you kill him yourself? I didn't think he had any issues with killing a human. I was fairly certain it wouldn't be his first time. I stopped breathing when he leaned in close again and snarled in my face. Because of his brother, he spat at me through clenched teeth. Dean mother, fucking, Winchester. As he snarled the last name, the deranged hunter jammed the tip of the knife into my throat hard, finally punching through my skin. It was so sudden that I didn't have time to prepare myself for the pain that shot through me. But he seemed to be ready for it, and clamped his large hand over my mouth again to stifle the scream. Maggie? A small voice whispered next to me, making me freeze. Molly shifted but didn't turn. The hunter slowly lifted his hand from my mouth, while keeping the tip of the knife jammed into my throat. He just stared at me expectantly as I panted. Everything's okay, Molly. Go back to sleep, I whispered through gritted teeth. That little pinprick felt like he had shoved the entire blade into my neck. We continued to stare at each other while I waited to see what Molly would do. I let out a relieved sigh when her breathing evened out again, but I gasped when his fingers curled over my mouth again and pulled the blade out of my burning skin. The psychopath leaned in and stuck his tongue into the hole he had left on my throat, and lapped at the blood pooling there. Interesting. He sat up with his hand still covering my mouth and tilted his head at me. I just stared up at the shadow tormenting me with a mix of bewilderment, terror, and seething hatred. Your blood tastes like mine. I half expected it to taste like mud. This guy was completely insane. Fuck you, asshole, I hissed under his hand. It came out all muffled, but judging by his giggle, I was pretty sure he understood what I was trying to say. You're a feisty one, aren't you? He whispered. I like feisty. I just laid there panting through my nose while he laughed. After a moment of us just staring at each other, he slowly lifted his hand from my mouth. And the name's Gordon, by the way, not asshole. No, you're definitely an asshole. Gordon just chuckled. He started eyeing me up and down, making me squirm uncomfortably underneath him. Just tell me, what the hell do you want from me? I stammered nervously. I need a distraction. Of a what? My fear-rattled brain had no idea what he was talking about. I need you to distract the older brother long enough for me to kill the younger one. How am I supposed to do that? He just huffed and, even though I couldn't see his face, I could just imagine the eye roll he was giving me. Come now, little girl. I think you know how. In fact, I did know how, but I was hoping he would have another suggestion. I wasn't that lucky. He's a man, sweetheart. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what men want. No, I can't. I'm only 17. I was becoming increasingly hysterical, and my voice rose in pitch as I began to panic. Hey, SHHH, it's all right? He whispered at me, stroking my hair. If that's how you feel about it, I can get you both right now and bury your bodies in the backyard. He was cooing at me as if he were trying to calm a fussy baby. It wasn't working. I hitched a defeated sob before he covered my mouth again. If you keep that up, you're gonna wake the kid. Then I may not have a choice. I shook my head frantically, whimpering, and the hunter sat up again as he let out a long, drawn-out sigh. He took his hand off my mouth, sliding his palm down to cup my chin, and just sat there waiting for me to make up my mind. Oh, okay, whatever you want. I laid there trembling with my eyes shut, trying to breathe through the panic that was setting in. His hand moved again, sliding even further down, and wrapping around my throat. He jerked me up into a sitting position and grabbed the back of my neck with his other hand. He still held the knife, and I could feel the handle pressing into my nape. My eyes flew open, and I let out a startled squeak. That's a good freak. Moonlight shone on his face from the front window of the tiny living room we had bedded down in. He straddled my lap and held me close to his face, so that all I could see were his eyes. They were bloodshot like he had just come off a week-long bender, or hadn't slept in just as long. But there was something else hiding behind those tired-looking eyes. Something crazed and desperate. Something monstrous. Do you promise not to hurt my sister? I croaked, trying to speak with this psycho squeezing my throat. He smiled, but the smile never reached his eyes. I knew I was deluding myself by even asking, but I was desperate to believe that there was some good in this human. Sure, kid, sure. He suddenly jerked me against his body and pressed his lips against my ear. I shivered in disgust at the feeling of his hot breath on the side of my face. And who knows, you might even have some fun with old Dino before you bite it. Please, no, I breathed. Come on now, sweetheart. Do you really want to die a virgin? I don't think I can do this, I muttered as I sat in the passenger seat of Gordon's car. I stared through the big front window of the local dive, my stomach tying itself in knots. I could see the two men sitting at the bar, one tall with longish, brown hair, and drinking a beer, while the other, slightly shorter man was downing whiskey like it was going out of style, the latter being my target. I think I'm gonna puke. You ever wanna see your sister again? Gordon said, staring through the same window. In one piece, that is? You'll do as you're told. I shivered at the thought of finding my sister chopped up in pieces at the hands of this sadistic bastard. I've never even kissed a boy. I whined, almost in tears. How am I gonna seduce that guy? I gestured toward the scruffy hunter with short, slightly mussed hair, and then wrapped my arms around myself, looking for comfort that wasn't there. Is that what the problem is? Gordon chuckled. You've never been kissed? I looked away when his eyes fell on me, regretting instantly having opened my stupid mouth. Well, I can help with that. What? I croaked, jerking my head around to look at him again. His only reply was to grab me by the shoulders and yank me toward him. His face smashed into mine so hard that our teeth smacked together painfully. I tried to shove him away, but he grabbed the back of my head to hold me in place. It all happened so fast that I didn't have time to shut my mouth before his disgusting tongue was wriggling inside, pushing against mine. The kiss was aggressive and demanding. Everything that he was. He only released me when I screamed into his mouth. He pulled back slowly but held my face close to his. There, now you've been kissed. His grin grew wide, and his white teeth against his dark skin seemed to glow. All I could do was pant, trying to catch my breath. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I should keep you around for a while. He lifted the hand that wasn't holding the back of my head and ran his thumb over my bottom lip. It gets lonely on the road. No, please don't, I whimpered. He just snickered at my fear. Then do your fucking job, he snarled, the grip on the nape of my neck tightening. I grimaced at the pain and nodded frantically until he let go, shoving me hard against the door. I spent too much money on that dress, that makeup fucking cleaning you up to have you back out now. I just sat curled up in a ball against the door, trying to look small. Get your ass in there and get Dean to leave with you. Do you get me? I just nodded. I was too afraid to speak. I flinched when he reached over me, grabbed a door handle and pulled it to open the door. I was still leaning on it, and it nearly dumped me out onto the pavement. Go! He hissed in my ear before shoving me the rest of the way out. I stood next to the car, my knees shaking and my ankles nearly buckling because of the high heels. My heart began to pound as I walked slowly toward the bar, and it only beat harder and faster the closer I got. By the time I stepped through the door of the bar, I was sweating and trying not to throw up. The little bell over the door tinkled, raising every head in the place to see who had just walked in, and I suddenly felt naked. Eyes all over the room followed me as I made my way to the far side of the bar and took a seat, trying not to make eye contact with any of them. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, and was never more grateful to be wearing makeup than I was right now. "What'll it be, sweetheart?" a man's voice said, suddenly pulling me out of my own head. Huh. I jumped and looked up to see the bartender staring at me with a bemused grin on his face. "What can I get you to drink?" he said slowly, as if I was too dim-witted to understand him the first time. "Oh, right, sorry," I blurted. Something sweet?" I had no idea what to order, but I figured anything sweet would have to be mixed, and not be straight alcohol. The man stood there, scratching his chin and squinting at me, thinking, "You seem like a fuzzy navel gal to me." I just smiled and nodded my head. I had no clue what that was, but I had to play the part or Molly was dead. "Add a couple cherries, please," I added quickly when he turned to mix the drink. He looked over his shoulder and smiled at me. "Sure thing, sweetheart." Gordon had said to order something with olives or cherries, so I could eat them in front of Dean. Anything to draw attention to my mouth, I guess. But I hate olives, so cherries it would have to be. I watched the bartender as he worked, not really paying attention to much of anything. When he moved to the side to grab the cherries, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror behind the rows of bottles. It wasn't my face staring back at me. It was my mother's. Gordon had told me to become someone that men would find attractive. She was the most beautiful woman that I had ever known. Tall and slender with golden locks that reached the middle of her back, and the most beautiful blue eyes you ever saw. It seemed like a good idea at the time, but now I was regretting the decision. The reflection seemed to stare back at me with disappointment. Using her face to deceive and to kill? This would break her heart if she knew. I had to look away or I'd lose my nerve and run out the door, signing my and Molly's death warrants. "Here you go. One fuzzy navel with cherries," the man behind the bar said as he placed my drink down on a napkin. I smiled my thanks at him, and he moved toward the other end to see if the two men wanted more drinks. I watched as Dean raised two fingers gesturing toward himself and his brother. When the bartender moved away to get the drinks, Dean's eyes met mine, and I looked away quickly. I swore under my breath, kicking myself internally for the cowardly behavior. How was I gonna get this guy to leave with me if I couldn't even look him in the eye? I raised my eyes slowly, keeping my head down, and to my surprise, he was still staring at me. He was definitely interested. When he smiled softly at me, I couldn't help but smile back. He had a kind face, and his eyes were a beautiful warm green. I forced myself to hold his gaze and not look away. I grabbed the toothpick that speared two cherries out of my glass, and brought it to my lips, and pulled one off with my teeth. I watched as his eyes dropped to the cherry between my teeth, and his jaw dropped open. I smiled as I wrapped my lips around the cherry and sucked it into my mouth. His jaw clamped shut and he swallowed hard. I closed my eyes as I bit into the sweet little fruit, and opened them again as I began to chew. After staring at my lips in a trance for a good long minute, he finally turned, whispered something at his brother, grabbed his drink, and sauntered toward me. This was it. There was no backing out now. I swallowed hard, trying to push down the lump that was forming in my throat. "Hey there," he said as he sat on the stool next to me. "I'm Dean." His voice floored me into silence for a moment. It wasn't what I had expected. I believed hunters were gruff and ill-tempered beasts, so expected his voice to reflect that. But it was light, yet still masculine, and sexy as hell. Hi, I stuttered back. I'm Maggie. I had intended to use my mother's name, Nadine, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I couldn't add to the disappointment she would feel at what I was doing now. He seemed to sense that there was something wrong, and he looked at me with genuine concern in his eyes. "You okay?" he whispered. "I can go if..." "No," I blurted a little too loudly before catching myself. It's been a long time since I did anything like this. Yeah, a very long time. More like never. He just smiled at me again. Not a malicious smile like Gordon, but a kind smile of understanding. "Well, hookups are kinda like riding a bike," Dean leaned in to whisper in my ear. "You never really forget." I turned my head to look at him, and he was still leaned into me, so our faces were so close that I could smell the strong alcohol on his breath. It was making me kinda dizzy even though I hadn't even touched my own drink. Or maybe it was the fact that he was looking at me like I was a big, juicy cheeseburger, and he was starving to death. Yeah, maybe. I was so entranced by his hungry eyes that I didn't see it coming until I felt his hand wrap around my waist, making me nearly jump out of my skin. He chuckled, sliding his hand away from my waist, settling for resting it on my knee. I cleared my throat and sat up straight on the stool, trying to compose myself. I had to stop acting like a nervous rabbit if I was gonna get through this. I'm sorry, Dean. Kinda rusty. I laughed nervously, looking down at my untouched drink, and tucking my hair behind my ear. You're gorgeous, you know that? His fingers stroked over my trembling leg, and I couldn't help the blush that crept up my cheeks. My face was so hot that I was sure he could see it even through all the makeup. His knowing smile only confirmed it. That line always work for you? I whispered back, trying to seem unimpressed even though I knew it was already too late for that. Well, I'll have to let you know. His hand suddenly slid up my leg to rest on my upper thigh. I looked down at his hand and then back up to his face. Looks promising though. His smile spread into a wide grin, and his fingers squeezed my leg gently. I could suddenly feel Gordon's eyes burning a hole in the back of my head and knew I had to get this show on the road, as it were. You got a place we can go to, get to know each other better? I whispered, picking at my fingernails. Yeah, I got a room at the motel next door, Dean whispered back. I grabbed the clutch from my lap to pay for the drink, a $20 bill that Gordon had shoved in there, just in case Dean didn't bite, but Dean put his hand over mine to stop me. No, I got this, baby. He pulled a wad of bills out of his back pocket and laid a 10 down on the counter, next to my still untouched glass. Let me go talk to my brother a minute and take care of my tab. Be right back. He walked around the end of the bar and whispered something to his brother, and laid money down on the bar. I heard him say something like you should get another room. His brother made an annoyed face, glanced up at me, and looked away quickly. Something told me that Sam had gotten used to Dean's behavior when it came to women. You ready? He was holding out his hand, waiting for me to take it. Yeah, I'm ready. I wasn't sure if I was trying to convince him or myself of that. He led me out the front door of the bar, and I couldn't help but glance to the far end of the parking lot. I could see Gordon's white teeth grinning at me. I couldn't see his face in the dark, just his teeth. It reminded me of the Cheshire Cat's floating smile in Alice in Wonderland. I shivered even though the night was warm. When we got to his room and Dean unlocked the door, he turned on the light and stepped aside to let me go in first. I stood in the middle of the room, frozen. I had absolutely no idea how I was gonna do this. Have a seat, sweetheart, he said as he took off his jacket and laid it over a chair. Anywhere you like. He walked past me toward the little kitchenette, looking for something. You want a drink? I got a bottle of Jim Beam around here somewhere. I don't really drink hard liquor. Dean looked up at me and gave me an incredulous look, like he didn't quite believe me. Fragile stomach. I chuckled nervously with a hand over my belly. He shrugged and walked over to the little refrigerator, pulling out 2 brown bottles. How about a beer? He said, smiling, holding them up for me to see. I'd never had a beer, but I thought maybe it would help me relax. Okay, I said with a small smile back, sitting down on the edge of one of the 2 queen-size beds. He pried the cap off of one of the bottles with a silver ring on his right hand, and handed it to me before doing the same with the other bottle. He took a long swig and sat down on the other bed, facing me. I took a sip and grimaced at the taste before I realized what I was doing. Guess you're not a beer drinker either, huh? He said with an amused chuckle. No, I guess not. I took another sip trying to get a taste for it, but the second sip didn't taste any better than the first. Do you mind if I sit over there? Dean said, gesturing at the spot on the bed to my right. I tensed up a little but hoped he didn't notice. And no, I don't mind, I whispered, shaking my head. He stood up and walked a few feet to the other bed and sat down beside me, his left hand landing on my knee again. My eyes darted from his hand to his face, and then away to stare at the wall in terror. I took a giant swig of my beer, without thinking, and nearly choked. It took a minute to stop coughing while Dean just stared at me. It appeared that alcohol of any kind was definitely not for me. You okay there, baby? Dean whispered, rubbing his thumb over my knee. I looked back at his green eyes, and they were scrunched together with a mixture of concern and amusement. He grabbed my half-drunk beer and placed it in his nearly empty one on the nightstand. Yeah, I swallowed my beer too fast, that's all. His gaze seemed to be searching my eyes for something, but I wasn't sure what. And by the time I realized what he was doing, it was too late. Dean's soft lips were already pressing lightly against mine, planting little butterfly kisses. I did my best not to move away, but I couldn't hide the shiver or the shuddering breath that fell out of my mouth. After a few pecks, His kisses became more insistent, and I felt his tongue sliding across my bottom lip. I knew what he wanted. I wasn't completely naive. I slowly opened my mouth, and his tongue darted between my teeth, feeling touching everywhere that he could reach. The hand that had been on my knee a moment ago wrapped around my waist, pulling me closer, while his other hand cupped the back of my neck, caressing it gently. I had never felt anything like what Dean was doing, and the heat rising up from down below was more than a little scary. I tried to hold back the trembling and participate in what was happening. So I slid my tongue forward, lightly brushing it against his. And just that tiny touch pulled a groan, almost a growl, from somewhere deep within the hunter. For some reason, knowing that I had caused that reaction in him felt exhilarating. So I did it again. His hold on me tightened, and he deepened the kiss so much that it was almost impossible to breathe. "Fuck, you feel so good, baby girl," Dean rasped out when he finally pulled back. I was panting so hard that I couldn't make myself respond with more than a whimper. His mouth latched onto the side of my neck just below my ear, and I gasped at all the overwhelming sensations that were hitting me at once. While his mouth sucked at my throat, his hands never stopped moving over my body. One hand moving up and down my back, while the other slid from my neck, down my collarbone toward my oh god. His fingers skimmed the side of my breast, leaving a trail of heat in their wake. I suddenly couldn't think. Dean, I croaked, my eyes shut tight. He chuckled against the burning skin of my throat, and I felt teeth lightly nip at the skin. That he'd been sucking, a hickey moan that tumbled out of my mouth, surprised even me. I bit my bottom lip to try to keep it from happening again, but the damage had been done. "You like that? Huh, baby," Dean growled, and did it again, letting his teeth scrap across my neck again, just enough for me to feel. Oh god, yes. I breathed out in harsh pants. He was teasing, playing my body like a master playing a violin. When his thumb brushed over my nipple through the thin material of my dress, no bra at Gordon's insistence, I was suddenly rocked by a full-body tremor that made me go limp in his arms. I was vaguely aware of myself falling backwards on the bed with Dean leaning over me, continuing to explore my body with his hands and his mouth. I felt like I was going to explode until I felt his hand creep up the inside of my thigh and under my dress. My mind screamed at me in a panic that I wasn't ready for this. "No," I blurted before I could stop myself. "Stop." I pushed him off of me and ran to the other side of the room. Before I realized what I was doing, I stood with my back wedged into the corner behind the little table and chairs, trying to yank my dress down over my exposed thighs, and shaking in terror. "Whoa, hey," Dean whispered at me in shock. "Take it easy, sweetheart." He was still half laying across the bed with his arms out in a placating gesture, showing me that he was unarmed. "I'm not gonna hurt you." When my brain finally switched back on and it hit me what I had just done, my hand flew up to my mouth in horrified shock. I just got my sister killed. No, I had to salvage the situation. I ran back over to the bed, straddled his lap, and began kissing him again frantically. He just stared at me, wide-eyed, not even attempting to kiss me back. "I'm sorry," I whined. "I didn't mean it, please." In a last-ditch effort to fix this, I grabbed his crotch, trying to get him back in the mood. I rubbed at the quickly softening bulge in his pants, desperate to work him up again. But judging by the look on his face, it was a hopeless endeavor. I slowly slid off his lap and curled up against the headboard with my arms wrapped around my legs, trying to look small. "Whoa, what the hell?" Dean croaked, scooting to the foot of the bed. "I'm sorry, Molly." I sobbed into my knees. "I'm sorry. I was so screwed. I went and fucked up. Again. I'm sorry, Molly." I sobbed into my knees. "I'm sorry. I was so screwed. I went and fucked up. Again." Dean was staring at me like I was a ticking time bomb with 5 seconds left on the timer. His mouth was gaping like he wanted to say something, but didn't know what to say. He reached out to me, making me flinch. He pulled his hand back quickly like he'd been burned, and his eyes softened into concern. "Hey, sweetheart," Dean whispered, holding both hands up to show me that they were empty. "I'm not gonna hurt you." He slowly reached up and put his hand on my shoulder, and I buried my face in my knees again. I couldn't bear to look at those eyes for another second. Eyes so full of caring for a person that was helping a psychopath off his brother. Just tell me what's wrong, okay?" I see, can't," I muttered into my knees. He squeezed my shoulder gently when I started crying again. "Sure you can, you just gotta." "No," I blurted, jumping off the bed, making him jerk back again. "I can't. You'd kill me if I told you." Wait, what? Dean said softly, his eyes scrunching up in confusion. He stood up slowly and took a tentative step toward me with his hands still up in the air. Why would I do that? And never mind, it doesn't matter. I turn away from him, facing the window. Soft slivers of light were leaking past the edges of the thick curtains from the light posts in the motel's parking lot. We're dead anyway. When G. Gordon finds out that I fucked up, he's gonna. Wait, Gordon, Dean growled. I spun around just in time to see his eyes go from wide with shock to rage filled in the span of about 1/100th of a second. Not Gordon Walker. My hands flew up to my mouth as soon as I realized what I had just done. I never saw him move. 1 second I was standing in the middle of the room and the next, my back was slammed up against the door, with a giant hand wrapped around my throat. What the fuck is he doing here, bitch? He was snarling and spitting in my face, and when I looked up into his eyes, they looked almost feral. He sent you here to kill me, huh? He was shaking my head violently back and forth as he squeezed. I croaked behind his ever-tightening fingers. Please, my vision was starting to go fuzzy, and my arms were growing heavy from lack of oxygen. Oh God, this hunter was gonna kill me right now, and I'd never see Molly again. Please, I mouthed silently as my head began to swim. Just as I felt myself slipping, his fingers disappeared from around my neck. I gulped in a giant lungful of air that turned into a coughing fit as I crumpled to the floor at the hunter's feet. If you want to keep breathing, you're gonna tell me what the hell is going on, Dean said with absolutely no sympathy in his voice. When I looked up at him, he was glaring down at me like he was hoping I would refuse to answer. Gordon wanted me to seduce you, I stammered, dropping my head. To get you away from your fuck. When I say it, he's gonna kill me. From your B brother. Fuck, Dean hissed under his breath, angrily stalking toward me. I whined and pushed back against the door, hoping I would disappear right through it. But instead of grabbing me, he yanked the door open, shoving me out of the way. I wanted so bad to run back home to see if Molly was okay, but I felt so guilty about what I had done to this stranger that I jumped to my feet and followed him back toward the bar. I had to see if his brother was okay. What the hell am I doing? I whispered to myself. I was seriously gonna get myself killed. When I caught up to Dean, he was standing outside the door of the bar, staring down at the pavement. There was a small pool of fresh blood that looked smeared, like whoever had bled there had been dragged off. Dean ran into the bar while I stood paralyzed, staring at that red, wet puddle of blood. The blood that, if it belonged to the person I knew it did, was on my hands. I was so lost in my own thoughts that I didn't hear the door of the bar open and close, or see a very angry Dean Winchester until it was too late. All I felt was his massive body colliding with mine and his fingers curling around my throat again. Where is he, bitch? Where's my brother? He didn't even pretend to care if anyone else heard him as he yelled in my face. Where did that fucking bastard take him? He wasn't giving me a chance to tell him that I didn't know as he continued to scream threats and curses at me. He was beginning to hyperventilate, and soon all speech, it seemed, was beyond him. He raised his other hand as if to backhand me, and I closed my eyes, waiting for the blow. When nothing happened, I slowly opened my eyes, and he looked like he was in pain. I could see the tears threatening to give way behind his eyes, and it broke my heart. He appeared to be frozen in place with his arms still raised, unable to decide what to do next. I'm sorry, I wheezed between his bruising fingers. He jerked me close and opened his mouth as if to say something, but what came out instead made me wish he'd slapped me. An agonized roar poured out of him as the tears finally broke loose and rolled down his face. I thought I hated Gordon before. That sound of anguish made me want to kill him myself. I could feel his pain. It was my pain. Gordon had my sister too. Forced me to lock her in the basement before we left and threatened to come back and kill her if I didn't do what I was told. The only way he could make good on that threat was if he was close by the house. Or in it, an abandoned house. Carver Street. I croaked out the words as his fingers pressed into the fragile skin of my throat. Please. I swallowed hard, and I knew he could feel my throat working frantically to get the lump to go down. He slowly loosened his grip and stepped back out of my personal space. What? He still had a hold of my throat, which was the only thing holding me up while I coughed and panted for air again. The old abandoned house on Carver Street. If G. Gordon has your brother that's where he'll be. And how do you know that? He stared back at me skeptically. I didn't, in fact, know that for sure. But for Molly's sake, I had to hope that Dean would believe me. Because he has my little sister too, I said as my breathing finally started to even out and slow. His eyes got as big and round as dinner plates, and he slowly released my throat completely. What? He told me that if I didn't do this, he would kill my sister. I rubbed the tender skin of my throat as I spoke. He suddenly reached out and grabbed my arm, pulling me toward a shiny black car in the parking lot. He hauled me around to the other side and practically threw me into the passenger seat before running back around and sliding in behind the wheel. I wanted to complain about the rough treatment, but the glare he shot me made me think better of it. He squealed tires out of the parking lot, and for a second I thought he was gonna skid right into the ditch on the other side of the road. This guy was a lunatic behind the wheel. "What'd he pick you?" Dean finally said after a few minutes of silence. "I mean, you're really hot and all, but he could have paid a hooker to do it or something." Fuck, I so did not want to have this conversation with a hunter. I knew what he would do when he found out what I was, but I didn't know if there was any other way around it now. Two birds with one stone, I guess, I muttered, staring down at my hands in my lap. What the hell does that mean? When I looked up, he was eyeing me out of his peripheral, while he tried to watch where he was going. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly through my nose, trying to stay calm. Sitting so close to a hunter when he heard what I was about to say could cost me everything, but he deserved to know the truth. "I am a SH shapeshifter," I stuttered out and then sighed heavily. It kinda felt good to actually tell someone, even if he was gonna kill me for it. I was so sick of hiding what I was. He didn't speak, but judging by the way his hands tightened on the wheel, he wasn't happy about it. A few more minutes of awkward silence was finally broken when he started talking again. "So is this?" He waved his hand up and down at me while holding the wheel with his other hand. "The real you?" Damn it, he was asking every question that I didn't want to answer. No. Gordon wanted someone who was more your type and older." Dean growled and slammed his fist down on the wheel, making me jump and slide as far away from him as I could. When he saw my reaction, he took a deep breath to calm himself. "Please tell me you're not a dude. I don't know if I could ever get over making out with a fucking guy." "No, I'm not a guy." He heaved a heavy sigh of relief and went back to gripping the steering wheel tightly. Then he asked the worst question on the planet. "You said Gordon wanted someone older. Just how old are you?" I'm 17. "I'll fucking kill the son of a bitch." Dean snarled and then went quiet the rest of the way there, but I could almost hear his teeth grinding together. Why did this drive back to the house seem so much longer than the ride to the bar? Sam groaned as he came to, the side of his head throbbing exquisitely. When he tried to open his eyes, the right one wouldn't open, and he realized that it was caked shut with something, probably blood, that had run into his eye and dried there. He was sitting on what felt like a cold concrete floor propped up against the wall, and when he tried to move, it was clear that his hands were tied behind his back, and his ankles were tied together. He tried to wipe the blood from his eye on his shoulder. It helped, but his vision in that eye was still blurry from the blood stuck in his eyelashes. The room was dark, but Sam could see that the walls were made of cinder blocks, and there was a set of stairs on the right that led up. He was in a basement. Hello?" Sam croaked hoarsely. His throat felt dry and gritty, and when he spoke, his head began to swim. There was a gasp from the corner of the room, and he could hear soft scraping on the floor like someone was moving around. "Is someone there?" Then there was a soft murmuring sound that Sam couldn't quite make out from the pounding in his head, almost like a cooing sound. What's happening? Why am I here?" The more Sam spoke, the more desperate he became, making his voice rise angrily. The cooing sound got louder, and that's when he realized that it was a child crying. Then he saw her, a little girl no more than 10 years old in Sam's estimation. She had her back against the wall, sliding sideways toward the stairs. "Hey, are you okay?" "No," the girl screamed and fled up the stairs. She slammed into the door and started to twist and yank on the doorknob frantically, trying to get the door open. "Please let me out, Maggie." The girl was screaming hysterically, making Sam's already pounding head feel like it was gonna split open down the middle. "Hey, it's okay, sweetheart. I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm tied up, see?" The girl twisted her head around slowly, keeping her body pressed against the door, to peer down at him. Her face was dirty with multiple tear tracks running down her cheeks. She was so terrified that Sam's heart went out to her. "Who did this? Who locked us down here?" I don't know," the little girl said and broke out into sobs again. She tried one more time to get the door open and then slid down the door in total defeat. He made my sister lock me up down here. Maggie." She banged on the door, but nobody answered. Sam whispered. The whole room began to tilt, and Sam shook his head trying to clear it. He didn't know how long he'd be able to stay conscious. Who's he?" "I don't know," the girl sobbed in frustration. "Hey, calm down, okay? We were gonna get out of here. I promise. Why you promise? She stuttered and then sniffled, looking down at him hopefully. Why yeah, of course we are. Sam tried to appear confident, but he didn't sound very certain, even to himself. My brother will be here soon. Just you wait and see. But Sam knew that Dean was back at the motel with some bimbo, and when Dean hooked up, Sam always got another room for the night. Dean wouldn't suspect anything was wrong until Sam failed to show in the morning, and by then, Sam feared it would be too late. What's your name? She just stared at him suspiciously. I'm Sam. I'm Molly, she finally said as she curled into a ball, hugging her legs and burying her face in her knees. I want my sister, Molly croaked, trying not to cry again. I know you do, Molly. Sam felt around the floor behind him with his hands, looking for something sharp that he could saw through the ropes with. But all he found was a dirty floor. He looked around the room and noticed a small broken window near the top of one wall. When he looked down at the floor under the window, he saw several large pieces of broken glass that might do the trick. Molly? Sam whispered. Molly. Finally she looked up at him, and the look of utter despair on her face made Sam swallow hard. I'm gonna need your help, okay? What? How? I can't. I'm scared. Molly was hysterical, and Sam had to think quickly to try to calm her down. Molly, it's okay. Hey, tell me about your sister. Tell me about Maggie. Maggie, Molly whimpered. Sam nodded, hoping to get her to focus on him. What about her? What's she like? Sam asked, smiling up at her. She takes care of me. Molly sniffled again, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. She always makes sure I have something to eat and a place to sleep. She was gonna take me to the park before. Wow, she sounds like a great sister, Sam said quickly, trying to lead her away from that train of thought. Yeah, she protected me from him. She scrunched her nose up in disgust when she mentioned the unknown man, and then shivered. He said she had to do something or he'd kill me. She didn't say what it was, but I could tell it was something really bad. She said I had to stay in here till she got back, and then we'd be free. She sounds really brave, Molly. Sam had to move this along. He could feel time running out. You have to be brave now too, Molly. Brave like Maggie. What do you want me to do? She whispered. Sam could tell that she doubted that she could do anything to help them get out of this. You see that broken glass on the floor over there? Sam whispered, gesturing to the other side of the room with his chin. She looked where he had indicated and then nodded. Good. I need you to go over there and find me a piece of glass that's about the size of your hand, and then bring it to me. And be careful not to cut yourself, okay? Oh, okay, Molly said in a small voice. She got up and crept down the stairs and across the room. She got down on her hands and knees and inspected each piece, putting her hand next to the shards to find the right size. When she found one that was just the right size, she picked it up with her fingertips to avoid the sharp edges and brought it over to Sam. Good job, Molly. Now I'm gonna lean forward and I want you to put it in my hand carefully, okay? She nodded and he leaned forward and waited until he felt Molly stick the piece of glass between his fingers. Now I need you to hide in case he comes back. No, Molly whined pitifully. Please, Sam, I want to stay with you. She was starting to freak out again, and Sam had to give her a stern look to get her to focus. Molly, I will come get you when I'm free, but I need you to hide. Now, Molly jumped at the last word, but turned and fled into the darkness under the stairs. Sam heaved a tired sigh and started to saw through the ropes as quickly as he could manage, with his hands bound so tightly. He could feel the glass cutting into his palm with every slide of the glass against the thick rope. But he couldn't stop. He wouldn't stop. It wasn't just his life at stake here. He got nearly halfway through when the lock turned on the door to the basement, and he froze for a split second, and then started sawing frantically again. He kept going until Gordon's head came into view and he froze once again. Then the light clicked on suddenly, sending shooting pain through Sam's head again. Hey Sammy, glad to see you're awake. Wouldn't wanna send you to hell without you knowing who to thank. Sam glared back at Gordon, breathing hard through his nose. I told you once already, you sick fuck. Dean is the only one who gets to call me that. Sam growled through gritted teeth. Gordon shot him a wide, toothy grin but didn't respond. He just sauntered over to the younger Winchester crouched next to him and grabbed him by the hair. Gordon jerked Sam's head back, pulled the giant buck knife from the sheath on his hip, and held it to Sam's throat. Goodbye, Sammy, Gordon said with a sneer. Gordon, don't. Just as he began to press the knife into Sam's skin, there was a gasp from the darkness in the corner. Gordon's eyes shifted to the side, and he smirked sadistically. Sam held his breath and his eyes went wide. Gordon pulled the knife away from Sam's neck, slid it back in its place, and slapped Sam's cheek a few times playfully. Come out, wherever you are," Gordon called out in a sing-song voice as he rose and turned toward the staircase. When Gordon turned his back, Sam started sawing frantically at the ropes again, cursing inside his head. For a moment, Gordon just stood there staring into the darkness, and Sam wasn't sure if he could actually see her or not. Gordon tilted his head, shoved his arm into the pitch-black shadows under the steps, and yanked a screaming Molly out into the light. "Hey, girlie, almost forgot about you." Molly continued to scream and punch at Gordon's arm as he gripped the front of her shirt. "Did you miss me? Fuck you. Lem go," Molly snarled, trying to kick him as he held her at arm's length. Gordon snorted at the girl's tenacity and turned his gaze on Sam, who quickly stopped his movements again. "You hear the mouth on this kid, Sammy?" Gordon chuckled, but as quickly as flipping a switch, the smile turned malicious. "No respect." His hand swept across her face in a vicious backhand that sent her crashing to the floor. Molly whimpered and tried to belly crawl away from him, but Gordon wasn't finished with her yet. He snatched a handful of her hair, jerked her up off the floor, and against his chest. With one hand still tangled in her hair, the other wrapped tightly around the child's throat. "Disrespectful little shits need discipline." "Gordon, stop. Leave the kid alone," Sam shouted in a panic. "Your beef is with me. She has nothing to do with this. Why don't you let her go? Huh? You have me. You don't need her." Gordon started laughing again, and Sam thought that he had truly gone dark. Now he was getting enjoyment out of hurting little girls? Are we really gonna have this same old, tired discussion about which monsters deserve mercy and which ones don't? "What are you saying?" Sam whispered, his eyes growing wide. His eyes met Molly's, and she began to sob. "You're telling me she's a..." The words died on Sam's lips before he could finish. He couldn't see her as anything but a frightened and traumatized little girl. "She didn't tell you what she is, Sam?" Gordon chuckled again. "She's a bottom-feeding monster. A shifter." "So," Sam snapped, trying to hold back the rage that was itching to get out. "Even if she was a monster, she was still just a child. What horrible things could she have possibly done to deserve being treated this way?" So Gordon leaned in to whisper in the girl's ear, but loud enough for Sam to hear. "If you didn't tell him what you are, I'm willing to bet he didn't tell you what he is either." What?" Molly's sobs suddenly stopped with her confusion, and when their eyes met again, Sam had to look away. He couldn't make himself look her in the eye, not because she was a monster, but because he knew she would be afraid of him when she found out what he was. "He's a hunter, sweetheart," Gordon purred against her ear. "Just like me." "No," Molly whimpered, renewing her struggles to get free from the sadistic bastard who still had his hand around her neck. "You're lying." "No, I'm not, kid." Gordon suddenly shoved Molly away from him and toward Sam, but kept a tight hold on her hair. "Ask him." But instead of words, a quiet sob came out of the girl's mouth. "Ask him," Gordon yelled angrily, shaking her back and forth by the hair. "Gordon, please D." Sam tried to interject. "Shut the fuck up, Sam, before I gut the bitch," Gordon snarled, cutting him off. "I'm not gonna tell you again, honey. Ask him." The sudden calmness in his voice seemed to scare her even more than the yelling had. Is it true?" Molly croaked, a tear rolling down her cheek, leaving a new trail through the dirt caked on her face. Sam sat on the cold floor, staring at his lap, the lump in his throat keeping any words from getting out. "Come on, Sammy," Gordon sang out. "Don't keep our little monster waiting." Sam's jaw clenched and he was prepared not to answer when he heard a strange gurgling sound. When he looked up, Gordon's hand was wrapped around Molly's throat again, tightening, while her face was turning red. "Yes, okay, yes, it's true," Sam shouted in a panic. "I answered. Now let her go, Gordon." Gordon let go of her completely, and she crumpled to the floor at Sam's bound feet. Molly, are you okay?" The only response he got were choked, coughing sobs as she scooted away from him. Sam's heart shattered. She would never trust him now. "You bastard," Sam seethed. Gordon smiled before pulling the blade from his hip again. "Isn't truth or dare fun? Is that the house?" Dean growled, pointing at the house down toward the end of the block as he pulled up to the curb. He didn't want to park right in front of it and give us away. This car was friggin' loud. Dean was almost vibrating with pent-up rage, and I hoped that he directed it at Gordon and not me. I looked out the windshield at the abandoned house and shivered. It looked so much more ominous than it did when Molly and I decided to squat there. It looked ready to swallow up anyone stupid enough to step inside. "Yeah, that's it," I murmured with a shudder. But something wasn't right. I sat staring at it for a long moment before I realized what the problem was. Gordon's car isn't there. I watched Dean's jaw twitch and his hands tighten on the wheel. I could almost see the gears in his head turning in thought. He suddenly turned his whole body toward me, and I instinctively flinch away, pressing my back into the door. He was still a hunter after all, and I was still a monster. Was he driving a but ugly El Camino? He said, ignoring my reaction. I relaxed a little and just nodded at him, relieved that, for now anyway, he didn't plan to strangle me to death. Walker might be a complete whack job, but he's not dumb. He knows that I know what he's driving. He wouldn't be stupid enough to leave that car someplace where it would be spotted. What are we gonna do if he's not here? I said, the fear seeping into my voice. God, please let all of them be here, cause I don't know what I'd do if they weren't. Oh, he's here, Dean grunted, smirking up at the empty-looking house. How do you know? Are you psychic or something? Dean turned his head to look at me, and the smile that spread across his face nearly knocked the breath right out of me. It was very distracting. No, I'm not psychic, Dean said with a chuckle. Do you think you could have gotten me away from Sam if I were? I just shrugged and he snorted. But then the smile faded from his face and was replaced by an angry sneer. I can just feel it. He's here. They're all here. The dangerous look in his eyes as he turned to glare at the house again made it even harder to get the air back into my lungs. So what are we gonna do now? I croaked, trying to force myself to breathe normally. Dean didn't answer right away. He just sat there, staring down the block at the dark, foreboding house for a long moment. But then he let out a deep sigh. We aren't gonna do anything, he finally replied back without taking his eyes off the house that held both our families hostage in its maw. His response confused me. I grunted at him. What do you mean we're not? I'm gonna go inside, sweetheart, while you sit your ass in the car. Dean growled, cutting me off. What? I shouted at him in shock and anger. No way, Dean. That psycho has my little sister. I'm going. I turned and reached for the door handle to get out. He wasn't gonna keep me in this fucking car one more minute. The hell you are, he shouted right back, grabbing my wrist. He reached into his jacket pocket with his free hand, pulled out a set of handcuffs, and proceeded to cuff my wrist to the steering wheel. I jerked and pulled at the cuffs and winced when it pinched at the skin of my arm. I can't get in there, kill Gordon, and save Sam and your sister if I'm worrying about you. So stay put. No, please don't leave me in here. Dean, you fucking asshole. Let me go. Dean opened the door and stepped out onto the street, ignoring my panicked screams. I scooted across the seat to grab him just to have the car door slammed in my face. You can't do this, please. I pounded on the window with my uncuffed fist as I watched him pull his gun from the back of his pants and creep toward the house. Come back. For a moment I just sobbed, watching him walk quickly down the sidewalk. How could he do this to me? My sister was in danger. She needed me. But then I remembered the bobby pins in my hair. I dug around my scalp, frantically searching for one of the little pieces of metal that I could use to get out of these damn cuffs. When I found one, I yanked it out of my hair, pulling out several strands with it. I didn't care how much it hurt. Maggie was counting on me. Getting that hairpin into the hole wasn't easy, because my hands were shaking so bad that I nearly dropped the stupid thing. I finally got it in and started pushing it around until I finally heard a click and the cuffs popped open. Take that, you dick. I growled at the cuffs dangling from the wheel, scooting toward the passenger door. I giggled like an idiot as I threw open the door and stepped out onto the curb. I could just make out Dean's form moving through the trees growing in front of the neighbor's house. I followed him from a distance, praying that I didn't step on anything that would alert him to my presence. Just as he was crossing the lawn of the abandoned house, my feet tangled up in something that felt like vines on the ground. And as I went sprawling forward on my face, I heard a loud clatter of what sounded like tin cans clanging together. And, sure enough, I look at my feet, and there are tin cans tied together with twine wrapped around my ankles. What the hell? Dean whispered harshly. I looked up and Dean was half-turned, staring at me in shock. His shocked expression slowly turned to anger as he stalked toward me. I could see his knuckles turn white as his grip tightened on his gun. He crouched down beside me and grabbed the front of my dress with his free hand, jerking my face close to his. What the fuck are you doing? He snarled angrily. You're gonna get your little sister killed. I'm sorry, I whimpered. Shut up, he hissed. Just shut the fuck up. He shoved me away from him and grumbled as he started to untangle my legs from the string, holding the cans together. I tried not to move and make more noise, hoping and praying Gordon hadn't heard anything yet. But that was unlikely. I was so stupid. I had walked right into Gordon's makeshift alarm system and probably gotten us killed. I just couldn't stop fucking things up. Well, it's been fun, Sam, but it's time to pay the piper, Gordon said, scratching his chin with the sharp edge of the blade. His expression was subdued, but Sam could see the gleam of excitement hiding behind his dark eyes. He was getting off on the anticipation of a kill. It didn't seem to matter that it wasn't a monster he was killing. Since their first meeting, Sam had always had the feeling that if Gordon hadn't become a hunter, he would have become a serial killer. Do whatever you want to me, Gordon. But please. Sam's eyes shifted to the girl on the floor, who was still crying, and then back up at the psycho with the sharp blade. Please let the girl go. She's just a kid. Gordon looked back over his shoulder at the little girl for a long moment, before he turned to look at Sam again. Sorry, Sammy. Sam had to grit his teeth to keep his mouth shut and not tell Gordon to piss off for calling him Sammy again. This was not the time to make this lunatic angry. A monster's a monster, and I don't play favorites. It was true. Gordon didn't care whether a monster killed people or not. If they weren't human, they died. In Gordon's wackadoo brain, they all deserved to die. And now, he was moving on to killing humans. Sam wasn't really surprised. It was the natural progression of this killing-obsessed hunter. Please, Gordon, Sam pleaded, pulling on the half-sawed-through ropes, feeling individual strands popping apart. Killing a child? That's something you'll never be able to come back from. Gordon suddenly threw his head back and barked out a laugh. Sam squirmed uncomfortably at the unexpected and disturbing outburst. You think this is the first time I've ever had to gank a kid, Sammy? Gordon panted. The young ones are just as deadly as the older ones, sometimes even more so. Who would suspect that? Gordon pointed a finger at the girl trembling in the corner without looking at her. Sweet little face could be capable of such evil. Sam stared up at Gordon in shocked horror. As crazy as Gordon was, Sam never thought him capable of killing a child, monster or not. But it was becoming increasingly clear to him that Gordon was capable of anything. Gordon, please, Sam whispers in a growing panic. Now, I'm in a real predicament here, Sammy. Gordon crouched down in front of him and continued like Sam hadn't spoken. I don't know whether to kill you first and make her watch. He stood up again and moved toward Molly, pointing the blade at her menacingly, making the girl whimper in fear. Or to kill her first and make you watch. He knelt in front of the child and grabbed her shirt in a tight fist and pulled her close to him. You've been such a pain in my ass, Sam, Gordon whispered angrily, not taking his eyes away from the frightened little girl. Seems only fair that I return the favor. Please don't, Molly sobbed. You promised you'd let us go if Maggie did what you wanted. Sorry, kid, I lied. He raised the knife to Molly's throat, and both Sam and Molly screamed in horror at the same time. But just as the hunter pressed the knife to Molly's throat, the muffled clatter of metal sounded from outside, and Gordon froze just before the razor-sharp blade could pierce skin. He smiled before throwing the girl back on the floor and standing up. You just got a momentary reprieve, kid. He turned and stalked back up the stairs, still holding the long blade and the deadly smile on his face. Fuck, Sam whispered, immediately starting to sawing through the ropes again. It was becoming increasingly difficult to hold onto the shard of glass, as it became slick with his own blood. He had to pray that whatever or whoever had made that noise outside was armed. Finally, the last coil of rope popped free, and he heaved a relieved sigh. He pulled his hands out from behind his back and stared down at his bloody hands for a long moment. Are you okay, Sam? A small voice croaked from the far corner of the room. Sam looked up, almost having forgotten that the girl was there. Molly was standing with her back against the wall, shifting from one foot to the other nervously, wringing her tiny hands together. You're bleeding. Yeah, Molly. I'm okay, Sam said with a tight smile. Just cut myself with the glass. It'll heal. He stood up slowly and wiped his hands gingerly on the seat of his pants. Are you okay? Sam moved toward the girl with his hand out toward her with concern, and she flinched away from him with a startled gasp. Whoa, hey, Sam whispered, holding both hands up to show her he wasn't armed. I'm not gonna hurt you. I promise. He promised to. Molly squeaked, eyes full of fear. He was so going to kill Gordon. He had lost all the ground he'd gained with her, and he didn't know if he ever get it back. I swear to you, Molly, I am nothing like Gordon. But you kill people like me. You're a hunter. Molly was trembling, pressing her body back against the wall, like she was hoping it would open up and swallow her. Sam looked away, unable to hold her gaze as it became accusatory. He swallowed hard and nodded, not trusting what might come out if he opened his mouth. A hunter killed my mother. Her voice broke on the last word as a loud sob poured out of her mouth, and big, fat tears rolled down her cheeks. No, 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 Sam said, kneeling down to her level. He wanted to wrap her in a tight hug, but he knew that would only frighten her more. I only kill people that do bad things, like hurt or kill other people. I don't kill just because they're different. You don't? Molly whined, still tensed up and shaking. No, of course not. Sam shifted closer, reaching his hand out slowly toward her. She stared at his hand like it was a coiled snake, ready to bite her. Look at me, Molly. Molly's eyes jerked up to meet his, and Sam could feel all the fear and pain that she had ever experienced in her short life. Nobody deserved that, especially a child. I would never hurt you, Molly. I just want to get us both out of here, okay? He smiled at her and kept his hand out waiting. Molly sniffled, wiping her nose on the back of her hand, then reached up slowly and grabbed his hand. Before Sam even realized what was happening, Molly lunged at him, slamming into his chest. She sobbed against him, squeezing his middle with all her might. Sam's heart broke all over again for the scared little girl, a girl that many other hunters would have killed without question or remorse. It made him hate what he was. Hey, Sam whispered after a moment. He wanted to stay her forever, comforting her, but knew Gordon wouldn't stay gone much longer. Molly looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes, and Sam smiled at her again. What do you say we get the hell out of here? Huh? Molly brightened and nodded with a big grin. Sam stood up, grabbed her hand and made for the stairs. When they got to the top, Sam knew the door would be locked, so he slammed his shoulder against it to break it in. The door shuddered but didn't give. He tried again, still nothing. What the hell? Sam muttered to himself, finally examining the door closer. That was when he noticed that it wasn't just any old wooden interior door. It was a heavy metal security door with a steel frame. Who the hell were these people? Sam, Molly whispered fearfully, tugging on his jacket. When Sam looked down at her, Molly was on the verge of losing it again. What do we do now? He reached into his pants pocket, looking for his lockpick, but it was gone. Gordon was nothing if not thorough. Don't worry, Molly. I'll find something to pick the lock with and get us out, okay? He smiled again, but knew it was a less than convincing one. Sam cursed his brother in his mind. He never could think with his upstairs brain where pretty women were concerned. Dean, where the fuck are you? I'm really sorry. Dean, I didn't mean to. I fucked up again and had sabotaged probably the only shot we had to save Sam and Molly. I tried really hard not to come apart. Shut it, Dean hissed, cutting me off while he tried to untangle the string of tin cans from around my ankles without making any more noise. Stupid fucking girls. Don't know when to listen. He was grumbling to himself, which was only making him more angry. When he finally got my legs free, he stood back up and glared down at me. Go back to the fucking car and fucking stay there. I just nodded, looking away. I could tell that if I spoke, I'd only be making matters worse. I had a feeling that a pissed of Dean Winchester was a very dangerous Dean Winchester. I stood up and fled back towards the little stand of trees in the neighbor's yard, as Dean stalked back toward the abandoned house again. I prayed to a god that I wasn't even sure was there, that I hadn't gotten the Winchesters and my little sister killed. Because I was stupid. Fuck, why can't you just do as you're told? You stupid moron? I chided myself as I wove my way through the thick branches toward the car. I knew that my rebellious nature was gonna get me in trouble someday, but I didn't realize that someday would be today. Just as I was about to step out of the tree line and onto the sidewalk, I was grabbed from behind. With a hand around my waist and a hand over my mouth, I was jerked backwards and into the trees again. Well, if it isn't my sweet little piece of hunter bait. You miss me? A familiar, but terrifying voice whispered breathily in my ear. I had a feeling you wouldn't be able to follow through on our deal. Disappointing yet exhilarating. Let's go say hi to lover boy, shall we? He snickered in my ear and then kissed me behind the ear. I groaned in disgust and a shiver went through me before I could stop it. Keeping his hand over my mouth, Gordon proceeded to drag me back toward the house. I thrashed in his hold and dug my nails into the back of his hand, trying to make him let me go, but it didn't seem to faze him at all. When I tried to scream, he growled at me and squeezed my face, pushing my cheeks into my teeth painfully hard. When I grew quiet again, he continued dragging me toward my inevitable death. I only prayed that I would be the only one to suffer for my foolishness. When we broke through the trees, I could see Dean crouched in front of the front door, trying to pick the lock. Gordon let go of my waist, pulled something out of the back of his pants, and pointed it at Dean. When I saw that it was a gun, I screamed behind Gordon's sweaty palm. Dean jumped to his feet and spun around, leveling his gun at the threat, but jerked in shock surprise when he saw me. His eyes grew wide for a fraction of a second, before turning into that same angry glare as before. He was pissed, but I couldn't tell if he was mad at Gordon for taking his brother, or at me for screwing up his rescue. Probably both. Put it down, Dean. Oh, Gordon growled, pressing the barrel of the gun into the side of my head. Unless you want me to splatter this bitch's brains all over the lawn. I whimpered as the sight on the gun dug into my temple. Go ahead, Dean said, shrugging. He stared at Gordon as he spoke matter-of-factly, his eyes not showing a hint of emotion. She's nothing to me. You'd be doing me a favor. I guess I shouldn't have been surprised that he wouldn't care what happened to a monster like me. He was a hunter after all. But it still hurt to know that he thought that I wasn't worth saving, and I couldn't hold back the defeated sob that poured from my mouth. "Oh, come off it," Dean Gordon chuckled. "You and I both know that if you didn't give a damn about her, you'd have ganked her when she told you who she was working for. Now, put the fucking gun down, now." He punctuated each word by thrusting the barrel of the gun hard against my head until it was bent at a nearly 90-degree angle. I whimpered at the painful pressure on my temple and the ache starting in my neck. Dean's eyes shifted to mine again, and his expression softened into something akin to resignation. He heaved a heavy sigh before the gun slowly lowered until it pointed at the ground. That just made me cry even harder. I could have lived with the knowledge that I was gonna die if they got to live, but now we were all gonna die. Because Dean couldn't bring himself to let a monster get ganked. "Throw the gun toward me." Dean growled at the demand for his weapon, gripping it tighter. Gordon just chuckled and twisted the gun painfully, breaking the skin on my temple and causing a trickle of blood to drip into my eye. Dean let out a defeated sigh as he looked down at his gun. I knew what he meant to do, and I did whatever I could think of to stop him from doing it. I shook my head frantically at him and tried to scream no, but it just sounded like mumbling with Gordon's hand still covering my mouth. I jerked in his arms, but he just squeezed my face again to make me be still. "Calm down, sweetheart," Gordon cooed in my ear. "This wouldn't be happening if you had just done as you were told." He leaned over the side of my face and chuckled before raising his head to sneer at Dean. "Tick-tock, Winchester. You really want this freak's blood on your hands." Dean gritted his teeth and narrowed his eyes at Gordon, but finally threw the gun toward us. No, this couldn't be happening. I watched all my hope shrivel up and die as the gun landed at my feet with a heavy thud. I stared at the shiny silver gun at my feet, and an angry sob poured out of my mouth and between Gordon's fingers. What I'd done? It was over. I had fucked us all because I couldn't do what I was told. We were all going to die because of me. "Okay, Gordon, you got what you wanted." Dean growled angrily. "Let the girls go." "Now, sweetheart," Gordon whispered in my ear, ignoring Dean's pleas. "I'm gonna take my hand off your mouth, and you're gonna be a good little freak and pick up the gun." "Got it." I nodded frantically. Maybe if I could somehow grab the gun and pull away from him as I leaned over, I could shoot him before he could do the same to me. Even if he shot me, I still had a chance to end this here and now. He slowly released my face, and I started to bend down, but he jerked me back up by the hair and shoved the gun up under my chin before I could get very far. "Pick it up by the barrel." Shit, there went that plan. He started to bend over me, forcing me to bend at the waist, while he continued to press the gun under my jaw. We were fully bent over, and I could feel his hard length pushing against my ass. This was exciting him, the sick bastard. "Please," I sobbed in terror. I knew that when I picked up that gun and handed it to Gordon, it would all be over. "Shh, baby," Gordon cooed softly, letting go of my hair and stroking it almost lovingly. "Just pick it up and hand it to me, okay? I promise that I'll let you and your sister go." I could feel his mouth at my ear, his hot breath making me cringe. I knew he was lying, but what other choice did I have? I had to hope that he was telling the truth, even as my brain was screaming at me to tell him to fuck off. I reached a trembling hand down, but stopped before I touched the metal barrel of the gun. I was having trouble making my hand move that final few inches, and Gordon growled at me in frustration. "Pick up the damn gun, bitch," he finally screamed, making me jump. I snatched up the gun and held it over my shoulder until he took it from me and shoved it into the waistband at the back of his pants. "Thanks, bitch." Gordon spat as he grabbed me by the hair again and straightened up, pulling me up with him. Are you gonna let me and Molly go now?" I whimpered. I had my answer when he chuckled softly in my ear. "But, you promised," I whined, sounding like a petulant child. "Sorry, sweetheart. I don't show mercy to monsters. I catch 'em, they get ganked. Simple as that." This whole time, his gun never moved from its spot under my chin. But now he started caressing my throat with the barrel, moving it up and down slowly. Each time it moved down, it dipped lower and lower until the cold steel was nestled in my cleavage. The fear bubbled up inside me and poured out in a choked-off wail. "Stop it, Gordon. Leave the kid alone." Dean snarled low. He was really pissed now. More pissed than I'd ever seen him. Even when I told him that Gordon had taken his brother, he didn't look this angry. "What's the matter, Dean?" Gordon laughed. "It's just a monster. They don't have feelings. Not like we do." He pushed the gun down the front of my dress and between my breasts, and began thrusting it in and out, like he was fucking my boobs with it. "Of course she has feelings. Look at her. She's terrified." "Good," Gordon whispered softly, but still loud enough for Dean to hear. "Just the way I like 'em." Dean snarled when Gordon's other hand snaked around my waist and pulled me flush against his body, his erection more prominent than ever. Gordon, Dean bellowed in rage. Don't. That last word was dripping with dangerous energy, and I was just glad that it wasn't directed at me, or I would have peed my pants. But it didn't seem to faze Gordon in the least. He seemed to ignore it altogether. He pulled the gun out of my dress and shoved it back under my chin again. Now, Dean, I want you to turn around and kick the door in. We're gonna go see Sammy so you can say your goodbyes. I haven't decided if I'm gonna let you live yet, but considering how much of a pain in my ass you've been, I wouldn't count on it. I will kill you, you sorry sack o' shit. Dean seethed, his hands balled into tight fists at his sides. We'll see, Gordon said nonchalantly with a shrug. Now do as I say and kick in the door so we can get this show on the road. Dean snarled as he turned to face the old wooden front door, lifted his leg and drove the flat of his foot into the plate. The door swung open and hit the wall with a loud bang, making me flinch. Stay put, Dean, until I tell you to move. Gordon shoved me forward with his hand still tangled in my hair. He moved the gun to the back of my head as he walked me toward the house. Okay, Dino, move your ass nice and slow. Don't try anything stupid. Yeah, Dean grumbled as he trudged through the open door and into the dilapidated house. He stopped in the middle of the living room, not really knowing where he was supposed to go next. He turned his head and looked at Gordon out of the corner of his eye. I've always wondered why you care so much. Sam's not gonna turn bad. That shit's behind us now. Because, Dean, from the moment I met him, I knew. Knew what? Dean asked, confused. That I would have to kill him. Gordon's hand twisted in my hair, and I groaned in pain when I felt several strands pop loose from my scalp. I had the fleeting thought that if I made it through this, I was gonna be bald. But then I remembered that I was a shifter, and this wasn't my real hair. The things you think about when you have a gun to your head. That night we had drinks in the bar after you gave that vamp one hell of a haircut. That was still badass, by the way. Yeah, thanks, Dean said sarcastically, rolling his eyes. Anyway, while we were sitting there swapping war stories, I watched him. Saw the look in his eyes, Dean. The bitterness. The anger. Even then I saw something that had my spidey senses tingling. But, at that time, I didn't know what it was. Now I know what it was. Oh yeah? And what was it? That he was hell's bitch. Still is. Gordon spat. Dean spun around and made like he was going to lunge at Gordon, before Gordon pressed the gun to my temple, again making Dean freeze. He'll release all of hell to murder the world, Dean. Why can't you see that? Or are you two so codependent that you just ignore it because you can't live without each other? You don't know anything about us. Dean growled, taking a step back. So we might be a little codependent. But I know Sam is a good man. I know that I couldn't do this job without him. Wee Dean was so agitated that he was having trouble getting the words out. You help people. I croaked, tears rolling down my cheeks. You help people even when you know what it will cost you. Dean was staring at me like I had suddenly grown a second head. Even when those people are monsters. Dean's eyes glistened like he was going to cry, but he held the tears back. He smiled at me and then his eyes shifted to Gordon again. Yeah, what she said. Okay, enough of this sentimental horseshit. Gordon snapped irritably. Get going, Dean. Through the kitchen. He waved Dean through a doorway on the other side of the room and shoved me towards it. When we got into the kitchen, Gordon pointed at a large metal door next to the stove that had several deadbolts on it. It reminded me of a horror movie that I had seen once where this crazy, inbred family kept their killer mutant son locked in a basement with a bunch of locks on it, kinda like that. I had to change the channel before the killing even started because it scared the living shit out of me. Gordon gestured toward the door with his chin and smirked. Open it. Molly sat huddled in the far corner of the dirty basement, watching with wet eyes as Sam dug through boxes, looking for anything that he could use as a lockpick. Mostly all he came up with were boxes of musty clothes and stuffed animals that had been abandoned along with the house. He was busy searching through a box of toys when he came across a stuffed squirrel that made him smile. He wasn't even sure why he liked it. He just did. He grabbed it and took a sniff, deciding that it didn't smell too bad. Stood up and walked over to the frightened little girl. When he knelt down beside her, Molly's eyes zeroed in on the small furry plush that was no bigger than his hand. Hey Molly, this is Dean. Do you think you could take care of him for me? Sam handed it to her, and it looked so big in her tiny hands. She nodded and immediately hugged it to her chest, laying her cheek on its furry little head. He couldn't do much for her right now, but he hoped that it brought her just a little bit of comfort. When she didn't make any other movements, Sam sighed and stood back up to continue his search. Thank you, Molly whispered brokenly through fresh tears. He stopped and turned his head to see her big sad eyes staring up him. He swallowed back the growing lump that was stuck in his throat and nodded at her. He tried to give her a confident smile, but it didn't feel very genuine. He turned and got back to digging, so Molly wouldn't see the wetness building in his eyes. He had to stay strong for her. She needed him to find a way out. Another damn box of clothes. Fuck. Not even one friggin' paperclip. Just as Sam was about to pull his hair out in frustration at being unable to find anything that he could pick those locks on the door with, he heard those same locks clicking open. Sam grabbed the shard of glass, flew back to the spot he had been tied up in, and clasped his hands behind his back. The piece of glass was big enough and sharp enough to make a good weapon. He only prayed that Gordon would get close enough for him to use it. The door creaked open slowly, and a set of boots and a pair of legs came into view, but he couldn't see much more than that from the angle of his seat on the floor. But then the figure stopped just inside the door and remained motionless for a moment before slowly descending the stairs. Sam swallowed back his nerves and gripped the glass a little tighter. "Showtime!" Gordon gestured toward the door with his chin and smirked. "Open it," Gordon growled. Dean shot in the mother of all dirty looks, but it faltered quickly when Gordon pressed the gun hard into my temple, making me let out a hiss of pain. I already had blood running down the side of my face from how hard he had dug the barrel into my skin a few minutes ago, and I could feel a fresh warm trickle make its way down to my chin. "Okay, you sick bastard, okay." Dean spat between clenched teeth, holding his hands up in defeat. He turned and started flipping the deadbolts quickly. When he got the last one unlocked, he paused to take a ragged breath before he turned the knob. He pushed the door open slowly and took a tentative step through the doorway. "Stop right there," Dean, Gordon whispered, pushing me closer to the door. Dean froze with his hands still raised at eye level. "Okay, Dean, nice and slow." Dean growled under his breath and slowly began to walk down the stairs. But before Dean even got halfway down, Gordon shoved me aside and kicked Dean hard in the ass, causing him to lose his balance and fall, head first, down the steps. "Dean!" I screeched, trying to pull away from Gordon, only to have him jerk me back into his chest by my hair. But then another voice cried out and I froze. "Oh God, Dean!" A man's voice yelled in fear. Seconds before Dean's brother, Sam, came running from the far side of the room. "Dean, talk to me." Dean rolled onto his side and groaned, holding his head in one hand and his ass in the other. "Figured you'd find a way to get out of those ropes." Sammy, Gordon chuckled. "Had to be sure." Sam raised his head and stared up in shock at Gordon and then at me. The shock slowly morphed into an angry glare as recognition hit him. He remembered me from the bar. "Fucking bitch." Sam spat under his breath as he looked away. I couldn't say that I blamed him for that reaction, even if I didn't have a choice. But then there was a soft whimper from somewhere that I couldn't see, and the murderous expression evaporated from his face. "And Molly?" I croaked, around a sob. "Maggie!" My sister screamed and came running into view. She tried to run up the stairs, but Sam seemed to realize that that wouldn't be a good idea and grabbed her around the waist and pulled her back. She started struggling to get away from him, kicking and screaming. "Let me go, Sam." "Maggie!" "No, Molly, don't come up here, okay?" I shouted over her, hysterically screaming. "Stay with Sam." When she started to quiet down and go limp in Sam's arms, I noticed the bruise on her cheek and the dried blood under her nose. I never wanted to kill Gordon more than I did in this moment. I made up my mind that I would kill him if it was the last thing I ever did. "Drop the glass, Sam. You won't be needing it anymore," Gordon purred, tightening his grip on my hair. Sam's jaw twitched as he tossed the glass from the hand that wasn't holding the crying girl in his lap. I watched it skitter across the floor and into the corner without breaking. "Now, I want you three to move back against the wall over there." He pointed the gun at the side of the room where Molly and Sam had come running from a moment ago. "Please don't do this, Gordon," I pleaded, trying to pull his hand out of my hair. "Shut up, bitch," Gordon hissed, shoving me down the stairs. "Come on, up." He was waving the gun at the hunters and my sister menacingly, and I screamed. So naturally, so did Molly. Sam quickly turned her around in his lap and picked her up as he stood. She wrapped her arms around his neck and her legs around his waist, holding on for dear life. He put out a hand to help Dean up, and they slowly backed away to the other side of the room, never turning their backs on the crazed hunter. "Gordon, please," Sam whispered. "You have what you want. Let Dean and the girls go." Gordon only laughed in my ear as he held me close to his chest. "Right, let Big Brother go so he can come gunning for me later?" "I don't think so." Dean just snarled at Gordon with his hands balled into tight fists. "Thanks for making my point, Dean." "Fine," Dean snapped. "Then let the kids go, Gordon. They're of no use to you now." Gordon pulled my head to the side and took a long sniff up and down my neck. "Well, maybe one use." Gordon looked back up at the hunters standing against the wall, and I could feel the wide grin spread across his face. because he had his cheek pressed up against my neck. The bulge pressing against my ass told me exactly what that meant. You sick motherf. Dean, no. Gordon purred, cutting him off and pressing the gun painfully into my head again. Dean backed away a few steps, panting through his nose. Gordon ground his crotch hard against my backside and moaned. I think you'll be useful to me after all, my little slut. I think you'll be useful to me after all, my little slut. Gordon purred against my ear. By the way Sam's face went pale and Dean's turned beet red with rage, I could tell that they heard him loud and clear. A quiet sob poured out of me when Gordon kissed the side of my neck softly. The hand not holding the gun tightened in my hair and pulled my head farther to one side, exposing more of my neck to his wondering mouth. I cringed at the feel of his wet lips and hot breath on my skin. Please, I whimpered brokenly. Please just let them go and I'll do whatever you want. I knew it was pointless to bargain with him, but I had to try. Oh, sweetheart, Gordon whispered with fake sadness in his voice. You're gonna do whatever I want regardless. He suddenly spun me around to face him and shoved the gun up under my chin. That is if you want to live. His eyes shifted over my shoulder, and my breath caught in my throat at his malicious grin. Or maybe I'll just take baby sister. I'm sure she'd be loads of fun. No, I wailed through hot tears. Please don't. Gordon chuckled as he turned me around to face the hunters and my sister again. Gordon, you sick bastard. Dean snarled, taking a step away from the wall. They're just kids. But before Dean could take another step, Gordon leveled the gun at Sam and Molly. Take another step there, Dean. Oh, and Sam and little Molly get ganked together. Maybe I'll only need to use one bullet. No, I screamed, trying to tear myself away from the sadistic prick holding me against his chest by my hair. He just growled and jerked me back against him. Molly whined fearfully, burying her face in Sam's neck. Sam held her a little bit tighter while he whispered something to her that I couldn't hear. I assumed he was trying to soothe her by telling her everything was gonna be okay. I hoped it would be, but I wasn't optimistic about our chances at this point. Please, Gordon, Sam pleaded. Let Maggie take her sister out of harm's way. Gordon was quiet for a moment, and I couldn't see his face, so I couldn't tell what he was thinking. Please. Sam looked desperate to protect my sister, and it perplexed me. Why would this hunter want to save a monster, even if she was just a child? My musing was interrupted when Gordon shoved me away from him suddenly, causing me to trip over my own feet, and nearly falling on my face. But I frozen halfway between Gordon and Sam, unsure what he wanted me to do. Get the little bitch and get over in that corner. Gordon growled at me and gestured over his shoulder at the dark corner by the stairs. And if you try to run, I'll get you both. Got it. I just nodded, too afraid to open my mouth. Good. Get her and go. I grabbed her from Sam quickly and fled to the other side of the room. I sat down in the corner with my back up against the wall, holding a crying Molly in my lap. She was clutching a small stuffed squirrel to her chest, and I tried to distract her from what was happening by asking her about it. Who's this? I asked her, poking the squirrel on his little black nose. He sure is cute. I tried to give her a sincere smile, but it felt off. His name is Dean, she stammered through her tears. Sam gave him to me. She squeezed him tighter to her chest and sniffled, wiping her nose on the back of her hand. Are we gonna die, Maggie? No, mole. Of course not, I whispered. I pulled her close and hugged her as tightly as I could without hurting her. Everything's gonna be okay, I said, trying to hold it together. I hated lying to her, but I didn't know what else to do. Okay, boys, time to get this show on the road, Gordon said, pulling the knife out again as he held the gun on Sam. So who wants to go first? Gordon. Please, Sam said frantically, holding his hands up in a placating gesture. You don't have to do this. I'm not gonna go bad, I swear. Gordon just shook his head and sighed. I was behind him so I couldn't see his face, but his shoulders slumped slightly like he wasn't happy with what he thought he had to do. I know you believe that, Sammy. I want to believe it too, but you know that there are more important things at stake here. He raised the knife and scratched his head with the dull side of the blade. I can't take the chance that you'll turn. I just can't. I truly am sorry. And he did sound sorry that he had to kill these men. Was he right about Sam turning evil? I didn't know. Sam and Dean both seemed to really care about what happened to me and my sister. They didn't have to protect us. We were monsters after all. I, personally, couldn't see anything bad in either of them, aside from Dean having a short temper. But could I really fault him for being pissed, given the situation? Come on, man, Dean groaned. You know this is wrong. No, Dean. This is the only thing that's right. I can't let personal feelings cloud my judgment here. I have to do whatever I have to do to stop the apocalypse that's coming. His tone got angrier and angrier the more he spoke, and he stopped to take a calming breath through his nose before he could continue. So I repeat, Who wants to go first? The Winchesters stood there silently glaring at Gordon while he stood there waiting. Well, you can choose or I can choose for you. And it won't be one of you. He turned his head and smiled at me with that Cheshire cat smile that never ceased to make me shudder. Me, Dean bellowed. Okay, me. Dean took a step forward and gave Gordon the most terrifying stare I think I've ever seen on a human's face. It sent a cold chill up my spine, and I was glad that it wasn't directed at me. But you better get it right, you sadistic fuck, because if you don't, so help me God, I'll rip your spine out through your ass. Oh God, what was happening? I was about to watch the only two humans that have ever shown us any kindness be executed. Even knowing what we were, they still cared. And now they were gonna die because of me, and there wasn't anything I could do to stop it. Think about what you're doing, Gordon. Sam whined in a panic. You're about to kill innocent people. You're not a murderer, are you, Gordon? There's nothing innocent about you, Sam, Gordon said softly. We all know what you've done. We all know what hell has planned for you, and that you're too weak to stop it. But then his gaze shifted to Dean, and he sounded sad. Now, Dean, his death is a necessary evil, and I have no illusions about what it will cost me. I'll burn for it. Gordon slowly swiveled the gun until it pointed at Dean's head. The angry glare never wavered from Dean's face, and it kinda made me proud, in a weird way, that he didn't fear his own death. Gordon's head tilted to one side like he was studying an expensive painting in a museum. The silence in the room had become overwhelming. You know, Dean, I always considered you a kindred spirit. Dean chuckled humorlessly and shot Gordon a disgusted look. No, I mean it. When I first met you, you were just like me. You enjoyed your job and you were good at it. Still, Dean growled. And I enjoy ganking a monster as much as the next guy. His eyes slipped in my direction before jerking back to Gordon quickly. When they deserve it. Dean's loud outburst made me jump and Molly whimper, hugging me tighter. Dean ran his hand over his mouth, trying to calm himself down. It worked, but only slightly. What I don't enjoy is hurting little kids. What I don't enjoy is killing people that don't deserve it. He was breathing heavy through his nose and trembling, as he tried to keep himself from lunging at the psycho, holding a gun on him. Oh, they deserved it, Dean. They deserved it just by being. I gasped when he suddenly pointed the knife back at me without taking his eyes or the gun off of Dean. All monsters deserve to die, Dean. That's the natural order of things. Do they deserve what you're planning to do to that girl, Gordon? Dean spat, pointing a finger at me. My eyes grew white as I looked from Dean to Gordon and back again. Gordon chuckled at Dean, took a slow step toward him, and leaned in slightly to speak like he was telling a secret. No, that's what I deserve. I wasn't certain, but I thought that he deliberately said it loud enough so I could hear him. Dean growled at him like an angry pit bull as Gordon stepped back. But that won't matter to you in a minute. My heart was pounding as I watched this twisted exchange with a growing sense of panic. I had to do something quick or we were all fucked. But what was I gonna do? I didn't have a hope of overpowering someone like Gordon, even if he didn't have a gun and a giant knife. If I went at him without a weapon, I'd only be making matters worse. But how much worse could things get at this point? I was resigned to everyone around me dying and me becoming the plaything of a lunatic. It was at that moment that something glittering in the low light caught my eye. There next to my right foot was the shard of glass that Sam had tossed away when Dean was kicked down the stairs. I slowly pried Molly's arms from around my neck, making her whimper. I shushed her quietly and moved her off of my lap and up against the wall. I pointed to the glass and she nodded, seeming to understand what I was doing. I reached down to grab it when I heard a click. I looked up just in time to see Gordon cocking the gun. Sorry, Dean. This is a necessary evil, and I'll burn in hell for it. But it must be done. I couldn't wait anymore. I jumped to my feet, the sharp piece of glass held high over my head, and ran at the bastard. Before I thought about what I was doing, I screamed as I brought the shard down in a white arch, driving the tip into his shoulder, and slicing through the palm of my hand. Just as he pulled the trigger, Gordon screamed in pain and threw his elbow back into my face, causing the round to whiz past Dean's head by mere inches, and me to go flying backwards and slam into the concrete floor, the back of my head hitting hard. Everything was kinda hazy after that. Fucking bitch, Gordon bellowed as he spun around without thinking. Dean used the distraction to jump Gordon, driving him to the dirty floor. I was dangerously close to passing out, but I could hear Molly screaming and the hunters cursing and grunting as they fought for control of the situation. I tried to scoot away, but my head was pounding and the room was spinning, and I just didn't have the strength to move very much. Fucking get the gun, Sammy, I heard Dean shout. He sounded like he was straining to hold Gordon down, but I could only stare up at the ceiling, trying to hold onto consciousness. Dean, hold him. I can't get it. Sam's reply was full of panic, and it made my heart ratchet into high gear. but I just couldn't make my body move enough to even see what was happening. I could hear the angry grunts and growls coming from Gordon, and I so wished that I could do more. But my vision was blurring, and my limbs were going numb. Just as I was about to let the darkness have me and pass out, I heard Sam scream in terror, "Dean, look out!" Then it happened. The loudest bang I have ever heard. A gunshot in this small confined space that sounded like an atomic bomb going off beside me. I flinched, but I still couldn't make my body listen to me. Molly screamed again, and I could feel her hug me tightly around the waist. A tear slid down my cheek as the darkness slowly enveloped me, and before I blacked out, I just remember thinking, I fucked up again. Slowly coming to, brought a pain in the back of my skull that was so bad that my stomach did a violent flip, and brought my gorge up into my throat. I sat up quickly and rolled onto my side and vomited up what was in my stomach, which wasn't much. I looked at the mess and noticed that I was staring into what looked like a small, metal trash can like you'd find in a motel room. I suddenly felt dizzy and nearly toppled face first off of what I realized was a bed. I'd have fallen off if it hadn't been for a pair of strong hands that caught my shoulders and rolled me onto my back. "Whoa, there Maggie," a voice whispered. "I gotcha." My head was pounding too much to really recognize the voice or comprehend what had happened. "Sam, she okay?" Wait, Sam? Where had I heard that name before? And I definitely knew that voice. I just couldn't think past the blinding pain. What happened to me? "She's got a concussion, Dean." I felt my left eye being pried open and saw a blurry figure hovering over me. A piercingly bright light made the pain intensify, and I groaned, trying to turn my face in the other direction. Then my face was held still and my other eye was forced open, and that damn light returned. Why was this person torturing me like this? Just kill me already. Her pupils are reacting normally, so I don't think there is any serious damage. "Are you sure? You're not exactly a brain surgeon, Sam." That second voice was so familiar and I tried to rack my brain for any memory I had that connected with that voice. "Well, we can't take her to a hospital, now can we?" The first voice snapped quietly. "It would be kinda hard to explain if she suddenly shifted." I know. The familiar voice sounded so defeated. Why couldn't I put a face with that voice? This was getting really frustrating. Then the image of a man with short, slightly tousled hair and green eyes popped into my scattered brain. I knew him, but from where? And who was he? I knew he was important, but I couldn't remember why. "Dean," I croaked without thinking. Where did that come from? Who was Dean? "Maggie," that gruff voice said, sounding concerned. I felt a hand grab mine, and another sharp pain shoot through the palm of my hand. I winced, pulled my hand away, and tried to open my eyes, but it was just too hard. My eyelids were so heavy. "Oh, shit," the voice gasped. "I'm sorry, Maggie. I forgot about your hand." I tentatively flexed my fingers and could feel the skin on my palm pull painfully. "Don't move it too much, sweetheart. You'll tear through the stitches." Stitches? When did I cut myself? Then another image crept into my consciousness. A black man pointing a gun at the man with the green eyes. I saw myself stab him in the shoulder with a piece of glass. Is that how I got cut? Then I heard a shrill scream inside my head that I knew came from Molly. Oh God, Molly. I can't let Gordon hurt anyone. Fuck, I remember everything. Sam, Dean, and Molly were going to die, and I had to stop it. Everything after I stabbed the bastard is a little fuzzy. "Dean," I croaked again, sitting bolt upright in the bed. My throat was so raw that it felt like I had gargled a glass of sand. I panted as I frantically looked around the room. Sam was standing next to the bed while Dean sat next to me on the other side. Hey, it's okay, kiddo," Dean said, laying a hand on my shoulder, trying to comfort me. "Where's Gordon?" I wheezed, trying not to hyperventilate. I heard a gunshot. A sob broke loose and poured out of my mouth before I could stop it. I was quickly losing the battle with the growing panic. "Where's Molly?" Sam crouched next to the bed and grabbed my good hand. "Look, over there," Sam whispered, pointing at the other bed. Molly lay on her side, facing away from us. She was breathing deep and steady, and I could tell she was sound asleep. "She stayed up with you for hours before she finally conked out." I breathed a heavy sigh of relief. Molly was safe. What would happen to Gordon? I whispered with my eyes closed. I wasn't sure that I wanted to know. "He's taken care of." I was glad that Sam didn't go into detail. I wasn't sure that my stomach could handle that. As I tried to relax, the searing pain started to seep back in when I wasn't so focused on the psycho that had tried to kill everybody. I winced when I touched the back of my head with my fingers. Why does my head hurt so much? Whoa, what happened? You hit your head pretty hard on the concrete floor when Gordon flung you. Sam gently pushed me back down onto the pillow, making me flinch at the twinge of pain before, if turned into a dull throb. "You have a pretty bad concussion, but I think you're gonna be okay. You saved us, sweetheart, Dean cut in. If you hadn't done what you did, I don't think we would be here. The guilt started to eat at me at his words, and a tear trickled down my cheek. If it weren't for me, none of this would have happened in the first place, I whispered, staring at the ceiling. I couldn't bring myself to look at either of them. If I hadn't lured you away from your brother, Dean, you never. No, 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 Dean whispered, grabbing my face with both hands. None of this is your fault, Maggie. Do you hear me? You did what you had to do. He glanced over at the other bed, and I followed his eyes until they fell on my sleeping little sister. I suddenly burst into tears and quiet. Wheezing sobs poured out of me before I could stop them. I'm SOS sorry, Dean. I whispered through my tears. I never wanted to hurt you. Oh, or Sam. We know that, sweetheart, Dean said softly before he looked over at his brother. Don't we, Sammy? Yeah, of course, Sam said with a small smile. We know that when it comes to family you do what you gotta. Believe me, we've been there. Really? I whispered, wiping my runny nose on the back of my hand. Well, yeah, Sam answered, sitting on the edge of the bed, opposite from where his brother was sitting. We have done anything and would do anything for each other. He looked down at his hands in his lap as he swallowed hard. Even things we're not so proud of. If nothing else, I guess we had that in common. I laid back on the pillow again to stare up at the ceiling. All the things that had happened these past few days were swirling around in my head, making the already throbbing pain in the back of my skull worse. I put my hands over my face but hissed, pulling my injured hand away when the stitches bumped my cheek. Sorry about your hand, Maggie, Dean said. I grumbled at him and continued to glare at the popcorn-textured ceiling. Look at it this way. It's your first battle scar. When I finally pulled my eyes away from the ceiling and looked at him, his face was lit up in a huge smile, and I snorted out a laugh before I could stop myself. Why couldn't I stay mad when I looked at that face? But my happiness dissolved away when I had another realization. What is it? Dean asked, his brows coming together with concern. What's wrong? What's gonna happen to us now? I croaked, nearly in tears again. A part of me regretted asking. I knew there was a chance that these hunters would kill us just for being what we are. Even though I knew it was a slim one, the idea loomed over me like Gordon's shadow had back in that abandoned house the night we first met. I don't know, Maggie, Dean said honestly. But what I do know is that we're not gonna let you live the way you were living. Not anymore. Huh? I asked with confusion. You guys need a home. Someone to look after you. For some reason that last line rubbed me the wrong way. I can take care of myself and my sister Dean. I snapped quietly so I wouldn't wake Molly. I've been doing it for 2 years now. Hey, I know you can, Maggie, Dean whispered, trying to calm me down. And you're doing a great job. But don't you think Molly needs something more stable than bouncing from one abandoned house to another? I let out a loud sigh as I turned my head to look at my sister. He was right. I knew that she needed more than I could really give her. She deserved so much more. Okay, so, what are we gonna do? I said, sounding defeated. I don't know. We'll think of something. Dean stood up and started pacing at the foot of the bed, and it was making my head throb, watching him walk back and forth from one end of the room to the other. Dean, Sam said, standing up and walking into his brother's path. I just had an idea. What about Bobby? Do you think he'd do it? Dean whispered back. It's a big commitment and they're not exactly human. He tried to lower his voice so I would hear that last word, but I heard it anyway. I don't think Dean had been gifted with an inside voice. When I tell him what happened, I know he will. I could see the determination in Sam's eyes when he looked at his brother, and it made me feel just a little bit better about the whole thing. I'll step outside and give him a call. You stay with them. He looked up at me and gave me a confident smile. The smile I gave back wasn't quite so self-assured. Sam pulled his phone out of his pocket and proceeded to push buttons as he stepped out of the motel room. Dean took Sam's spot on the bed and smiled as he grabbed my good hand. Bobby Singer's a crotchety old fart, but you're gonna love him. Yeah, but is he gonna love us? I whispered. We're not exactly human. Dean's eyes widened for a moment when he realized I had heard his comment to Sam. Then he gave me kinda half a smirk as he shook his head. Caught that, did you? Yeah, you can't whisper for shit. Dean let out a laugh before covering his mouth. Yeah, well, when Sam tells him what happened, what you did for us, there's no way he won't fall in love with you guys. It was at that moment that I heard the springs in the other bed creaking and looked over at the other bed to see Molly rolling over, her eyes just starting to open. Hey, Squirt, I croaked, trying to keep the emotion out of my voice. Maggie, she shouted, jumping off the bed over Dean's lap and landing in mine. Are you okay? Yeah, goober, I'm okay. Just a bump on the noggin. My head was pounding, but I tried to keep the pain off of my face, for her sake. I noticed the little stuffed squirrel in her hand, and tried to use that to change the subject. How's little Dean doing? Huh. Oh, he's okay too, Molly said, clutching him to her chest. Little Dean? Dean asked, a bit confused. Yeah, Sam gave him to me when we were trapped in the basement. Molly frowned when she thought about what had happened. Hey, Dean said excitedly, trying to distract her from the memory. That's a cool name for a cool squirrel. That's my name too. Really? Molly giggled. Yup. Dean puffed his chest out proudly, and Molly giggled again. Molly instantly warmed to Dean, and I could see why. He had a naturally childlike way about him that I was just now beginning to see. My whole vision of what a hunter was beginning to fall apart in just the few hours I had spent with the brothers. And I was, to say the least, flabbergasted to learn how wrong I had been. Were all hunters like this? Or were Sam and Dean exceptions to the rule? But that was a question for another time, I think. Finally, Sam stepped back in the room with a huge smile on his face. He had barely gotten through the door when Molly scurried off the bed again. Sam! Molly screeched excitedly, throwing herself into his waiting arms. He picked her up and balanced her on his hip, while she wrapped her legs around his waist and her arms around his neck. Even for a 9-year-old, she looked tiny against his massive frame. Molly, Sam hollered back, sounding just as happy. You're finally awake. How'd you sleep? Good. Look, Sam, Maggie's awake too, Molly said, sounding so happy that she might burst. I see, Sam said, his smile widening. I smiled at the exchange. I had never seen her so happy, at least not since Mom died. It seemed that she had really taken a liking to this giant of a man, and he seemed to feel the same way about her. I could tell that there was a strong bond there. It was the first time I felt comfortable letting anyone but me get anywhere near her. I knew he would protect her with his life because he already had. Well, Dean called to his brother over his shoulder. What did he say? My heart suddenly leapt into my throat, making it so I couldn't swallow. He said, and I quote, "If you idiots don't get your asses to Sioux Falls right now, I'm gonna come down there and drag 'em back myself." So, I'd say that's a very good sign. I let out a huge sigh, and my heart finally settled back down into my chest again. A good sign? Molly asked, confused. A good sign of what? Sam walked over to the other bed and sat down, moving Molly into his lap. Well, you guys are going to be staying with a good friend of ours. His name is Bobby Singer. Sam watched Molly's smile evaporate into a dejected pout. What's the matter, kiddo? I want to stay with you, Molly whined, staring down at her stuffed squirrel. Sam looked up at his brother and sighed before he spoke again. We don't have a permanent place, Sam whispered, trying to hold it together. I could tell he hated to see her so sad. We're always on the road. That's no life for you and your sister. The job we have, it's dangerous, Molly whispered when he couldn't find the right thing to say. I guess that something had happened, and she found out that Sam was a hunter. She didn't seem to be fazed by it. Yeah, Sam whispered back. It's very dangerous, and I don't know what I'd do if something happened to you guys. And we always end up back at Bobby's place anyways, Dean interjected. He's like a father to us. You'll see us so much, you'll get sick of our ugly mugs. Molly giggled again and seemed to feel a little better. And now we've got a real excuse to drive to Bobby's place when we're not hunter working. Sam was so considerate of us. Even though he knew that we knew what they were, he still wanted to spare us the reality of what they did for a living. He was very sweet. You promise? Molly whispered in a small voice, leaning in close to Sam. I promise. Sam leaned his forehead against hers as he whispered back. So many thoughts swirled in my mind as I watched my sister with this hunter. For so long I feared that we would share our mother's fate, to die at the hands of hunters. But I was slowly beginning to realize that what I thought was a curse that we could never escape from, wasn't a curse at all. I just couldn't see it until now. It was a blessing all along. The end. Thanks for watching.